of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and I believe in truth, but I'm also a fan of justice. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at superhero movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is sometimes a challenge, but it's always a good time, and this week we are talking Justice League. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the man whose superpower is being super rich in comic book knowledge, Andrew Williams. Are you ready to dive into this one, Andrew?
I am.
Big episode. This is like capping off almost a little mini series we've been in and out of these past few weeks, going through the DCEU, really the Snyder portion of it that kind of, qualifies for the premise of our podcast. So big deal.
Sure, yeah.
Appropriately, this is the last episode of the year, closing out 2021. It's been a heck of a year, Andrew.
It has indeed. It's had its ups and downs, but much like our show, I try to focus on the positives only.
Hey.
It's not always easy, and sometimes it could be a challenge, but we try. But yeah, end of not quite the first year of episodes, but definitely ending on the first calendar year of the show, and it's been a good ride.
It has. Thank you for joining us along this journey. Andrew, what is your history with this movie, Justice League? And of course, to clarify, we are talking about the theatrical cut, the original release of Justice League. Andrew, did you see it in theaters?
I did. This would have been November of 2017. So this would have been when I was in Maryland, but knew I was coming to Chicago. So I was in a very weird place personally, because I was in the middle of nowhere in Maryland. And I actually remember going to see this in a theater. I used my movie pass.
Really dating the release of this movie.
Really dating myself here. And I remember before the movie, we saw a trailer for Rampage, the Rock vehicle, based off the video game of the same name. And the people next to me were just like, oh man, they're making a movie based off Rampage? And the one person was like, what is that? They were like, and the other person turned to me and they're like, you know Rampage, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's a video game. I know what Rampage is. And they were like, okay. Somehow that interaction is seared into my brain. But this came out right around the same time as Thor Ragnarok. I remember both of these movies hitting roughly the same time. And both heavily used the works of Jack Kirby. And one was pretty heavily praised and the other one really wasn't. So we're here to, unfortunately, talk about the one that wasn't seen as highly.
Yeah, I did not see this movie in theaters. Up until this point, we've talked about it on the show. I just wasn't too hot on the DCEU, but I just felt like I wouldn't enjoy it. And I'm not one to go and hate watch something. And I was totally fine just missing out on this movie. And I went a long time without seeing it. Technically, this week, preparing for this episode, is the first time I watched the theatrical cut of Justice League. What listeners may not know is that early on in us starting Best of the Rest, right around the time we were recording Green Lantern and Fantastic Four, which are some of our earliest episodes, we sort of recorded a bonus episode on Zack Snyder's Justice League, which just happened to be releasing on HBO Max at about the time we were starting this podcast, and we wanted to get, a few reps under our belt, and let's record an episode on that. It'll be good practice. Maybe we'll release it, maybe we won't. I don't know if we ever will, but that was kind of my excuse to finally watch Justice League. So I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League before I ever saw the theatrical cut, which I'm pretty sure is the reverse of a lot of people. And it made this experience pretty strange, maybe a little bit stranger than it would have been otherwise. But you know what we're going to do. We're going to jump into the movie, the theatrical cut, and bring you all of the high points, the positives of what it does well. There's been a lot of conversations about this movie, just like a lot of the movies that we cover, but most of them are pretty negative and are just focusing on what they hate about the movie and why it shouldn't have been made and why this person should be fired for this decision. And that's not the direction we want to go. A lot of people come together to make these movies. There's got to be something there worth praising, and that is exactly what we're going to do. But before we jump into that, I do have an email to read. This email is actually about BVS. And we recorded that episode already. Go check it out if you haven't already. We're joined by Thompson Conradi, a VFX artist who worked on the movie. And it one of my favorites in our catalog, if I do say so myself. So go check that out if you haven't. But I failed to read this email on that episode because it was so jam-packed. So I want to throw it in here. This is from Robert from Utah, who says, "Hey guys, you might have already got this suggestion, but I wanted to suggest BVS. I know it was successful, but definitely not the hit WB wanted. There are some misses in it, like the choice for Lex Luthor, but it definitely has way more good than bad. It has some of my favorite Superman shots in movies so far. My Mark Strong award goes to Ben Affleck, the best Bruce Wayne so far, and the warehouse scene is the best fight scene for Batman in live action movies. Yes, Robert, that scene rules. Hope you guys get to it one day, and I'm really enjoying this podcast. I'm almost all caught up, and now I'll have to wait for new episodes like everyone else." And of course, like I said, this email is pretty old, so Robert, I hope you are still listening week to week along with everyone else. Thank you so much for sending that in, and I love these shout-outs here. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. Ben Affleck is the best Bruce Wayne. I feel like he's very careful with his wording to say Bruce Wayne and maybe not overall Batman, but you know what? I think there's a strong case to be made there for Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. I think it's where he really shines more in his role.
I don't disagree.
And thank you for shouting out that warehouse scene. Spoilers for that BVS episode. I was the only one shouting that out as the best scene. So thank you for Robert for giving me some backup a few weeks later. So thanks for that email. But hey, let's move on to Justice League, the movie that was released November 17th, 2017 on a budget of $300 million. One of the most expensive movies ever made at the time. At the box office, it brings in only $657.9 million, which is very strange to say only $657 million. But despite that huge box office, it doesn't make money for the studio. I already mentioned that budget was extremely inflated, especially after the reshoots, plus an insane marketing campaign, even with that big of a return to the box office, not making money. Really, this movie needed to clear $1 billion to be deemed worth their time. And even then, it wouldn't be terribly profitable, but I think it would have been enough that they wouldn't have changed directions in the DCEU like they did. But man, well,
the problem is they tried to change directions going into this movie. I think that's part of why it ends up so uneven, because it's the hashtag positivity podcast, but it's the financial collapse of BVS that basically erodes Warner Brothers' faith in what Snyder is doing, which leads to them being like, well, what do we do? So we end up with this change in direction kind of midstream on Justice League that is not typically usually when you try to change directions in the middle of a film shooting, it doesn't typically go very well.
I agree. I think studio tampering has, off the top of my head, never made a movie better. It's usually a recipe for disaster, but oh boy. Despite all that tampering, or maybe because of it, this movie is not super well received by critics. Just a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, that is higher than BVS, so you could see that as an improvement, but obviously not near the critic score that the studio or the creative team involved would have wanted.
No, it's like I said, it is above BVS, but that's not necessarily like a selling point. It's not necessarily something you would be stoked about. And it is below Man of Steel's scores. And yeah, it's something that generally I feel like just kind of came and went. It was kind of odd to see what was essentially Warner Brothers' version of Avengers just kind of come and go with so little fanfare. It was a very odd situation.
Speaking of that creative team, the movie is credited as follows. Written by Chris Terrio, which is very interesting because Chris Terrio is Ben Affleck's guy. He wrote Argo, and Ben Affleck has collaborated with him on basically every project since then. He brought him on to BVS for some rewrites. He was tapped to do the eventual Ben Affleck Batman movie, which will likely never get made now. And he's the main credited writer on Justice League because of that. There's also a writing credit given to Joss Whedon, which we'll talk about more in a moment, but we know that comes from rewrites, as he came into this project late and did some reshoots and brought his own material. So a few different voices in there. Some might say, too many cooks type situation.
Yeah, the general story, and like I said, we can dive into this a little bit more later, is basically Terrio and Snyder craft essentially the first version of this film, which most of you may have seen with Zack Snyder's Justice League. But then it's Whedon who comes in to try to, quote unquote, fix it on Warner Brothers' behalf. So he did enough work to get credited for writing, and the further story suggests that he also directed most of what he shot, most of what he wrote, but with directorial credits, the credit for the DGA is much stricter. So Snyder ended up remaining the sole credited director, although Snyder himself claims he's still never seen this.
Which is super interesting. It's estimated that as little as 10%, maybe as much as 25% of what he shot is in the final cut that we see here. So where that is exactly is not quite clear, because like you just said, he hasn't watched it himself. But technically, this is a Zack Snyder movie. It says in the opening credits, a Zack Snyder film. And like you mentioned, as far as the Directors Guild is concerned, he has to be the credited writer because he was on board all the way to post-production. And because of that percentage, he has to be credited as the director. Joss Whedon wrote as much as 80 pages worth of rewrites when he came on board. And look, our show is about the positives of the movie itself, but this is just the behind-the-scenes story of this movie. You can't talk about this movie without bringing it up. And so we're not going to spend 2 hours breaking this down. Plenty of other people have, if you want to dive into it more. But the studio was pretty anxious after BVS and the direction this was going, and they were putting a lot of restrictions and a lot of notes on what Zack Snyder was doing, making Justice League, including trying to keep the runtime down to under 2 hours. In post-production, Zack Snyder steps away from the project to deal with a very serious personal and family matter. And that is whenever Joss Whedon is brought on board to see the project to the end. Stories might tell you that he was fired or pushed out, but what I just laid out is the official story, and I see no reason to deviate from that. Whether or not they were relieved that someone else got to come in and work on it, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but
yeah.
Regardless, you've got 2 people directing this movie and at least 2 people in that writing room, and it is, it's interesting, that final product, and we are going to dive into it. Are you ready, Andrew?
I am as ready as I can possibly be.
All right, let's do it. Superman is dead. In his absence, crime and evil are on the rise, both here on Earth and beyond. Sensing that a greater threat is coming, Batman sets out to unite fellow superheroes Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, and The Flash to form an alliance strong enough to protect the planet. Bruce Wayne's hunch is correct, and a cosmic villain known as Steppenwolf soon arrives to retrieve 3 powerful artifacts known as Mother Boxes that have activated across the globe. In an act of desperation, the team of heroes use one of these boxes to resurrect Superman. But when the Man of Steel awakens in a more sinister state than when he lived, the Justice League have no choice but to make one last stand against Steppenwolf and simply hope that Superman remembers which side he is on in time. Honestly, a pretty lean, straightforward story, considering how many superheroes we have joining together and how many different backstories that this movie tries to fold in. Very early on, we got Steppenwolf, we got these boxes, we've got the heroes uniting to take them on, and that is our through line throughout the entire film without really deviating too much.
No, not really. And that's actually something that I did appreciate about it, is the scope is fairly straightforward. One of the criticisms I did hear a lot about BVS at the time was just that the plot could be rather convoluted at times due to the cutting down on the editing and post-production and what have you. With this movie, they bring it back to a very straightforward narrative. Steppenwolf coming coming for Earth, basically, and the Justice League has to stop him. It's about as straightforward as it could possibly get. And yeah, it's, like I said, no real couple of twists and turns along the way, but nothing that really is too far out of left field. And yeah, it's interesting.
Well, let's start with the cast, as we always do. Specifically, the high point, the best casting, and best performance of the movie. We like to recognize one person who has gone above and beyond the Call of Duty and elevated the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award for Justice League?
I think I have to go ahead and give him a second Mark Strong Award. I'm giving it to Jeremy Irons as Alfred Pennyworth.
Good.
I know I gave this to him for BVS, but
he's still good. Who knew?
He's still good. He's Jeremy Irons. Who would have thought? But he's got a really good rapport with Affleck that I think really shines through in this movie. They have a good banter. It's a different dynamic than obviously that, say, Bale and Michael Caine had in the Chris Nolan films, but I think it still works. It comes off very effectively. And Sassy Alfred's my favorite. I've described this before. Batman Returns last couple of weeks ago with Michael Coe and Michael Keaton. I always love Sassy Alfred, and Jeremy Irons embodies that with a lot of the stuff he does, the quips he gets in. I just love it. And if you had just given me, I hate the idea of Alfred-centric stuff, but if you did a Jeremy Irons Alfred thing, I'd probably give that a watch.
You would be on board. And that would be the name of the movie, Sassy Alfred, the spinoff that exactly
and
one
how
person
could you
wants.
go wrong there?
I think that is a wonderful pick. I mean, I do love him as Alfred. It's different from the Alfreds we've seen before, but it still very much feels like Alfred. And it's great. Jeremy Irons joining an elite group now of Sam Elliott and Chris Evans as a 2-time Mark Strong Award winner. Chris Evans being the only other one who's received the Mark Strong Award multiple times for playing the same character. So, look at that. That's
an even more unique company.
Yes. Best of the rest statisticians, take note.
Take note, yes.
My Mark Strong Award is going to someone else, but not too far away from your pick. You know what? I've got to give it to Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne / Batman. I think you know what? He does a great job. I was almost going to start by saying, not every performance of him as Bruce Wayne is great, but I don't want to start off on a negative. What am I doing? This is the hashtag Positivity Podcast, and Ben Affleck is great in this movie. I have literally nothing bad to say about him. I have always said, I said earlier this episode, that he shines a little bit more as Bruce Wayne than Batman, in my opinion. And he gets a lot of Bruce Wayne time in this movie, recruiting the Justice League, especially Aquaman. He does that mostly as Bruce Wayne. I think it's all done really well. He's got a great look to him. He looks like that billionaire businessman. He wears the suit well, but he's also, man, he put in the work. He put on the muscles. You can see underneath that suit that he could, terrorize criminals at night. And we get a few good, just straight up Batman scenes in this movie. Back on our Suicide Squad episode, I mentioned I really like that scene with him coming down in the alleyway behind Deadshot because it's just classic Batman. And very early in this movie, we get him in the streets of Gotham on a rooftop. Then we first see him in a reflection of a door as the bad guy is coming to the rooftop, perched like a gargoyle, and then he's gone. Just classic Batman. And it sold me, I didn't think he was quite there in BVS, but I think he turned that corner. I think the script is better for him. In BVS, you gotta have that conflict with Superman, so they gotta be at odds. Mm-hmm. You got a little bit of anger and edge, and kind of derail the character. I don't want, again, I'm trying not to get too negative here, but in this movie, I really like where Batman is at. I don't know how to describe it, almost remorseful, maybe realizing that he might have been the wrong, humble, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, there's a humbleness to it. There's there's obviously a very imminent threat, so there's a drive, kind of seeing beyond himself, which in BVS, it's very much, this is what I think, This is the belief that I have, the fear that Superman could be not trustworthy, et cetera, et cetera. In this movie, it's a different dynamic. It's back to being or an adaptation to a team player, which not been his bag to that point, really. So
good stuff, but we have a lot of other cast members to go through, like Gal Gadot, who plays Wonder Woman, and we've had an opportunity to talk about her already a couple times on this podcast. She's great. I love her as Wonder Woman. Perfect casting. As far as matching up just a performance and look to a character, I know I just gave the Mark Strong award to Ben Affleck, but I think Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman is the best casting in the DCEU, in the sense that I couldn't imagine a year from now someone else playing Wonder Woman all of a sudden. It'd be very strange.
No,
whereas,
I agree.
We've got Robert Pattinson playing Batman, and everyone's going to accept that, no problem, because Batman is just that kind of character. But I think Gal Gadot's performance and look and everything is just so on point that she has become Wonder Woman. I mean, I think she's great in this. I like her dynamic with Bruce Wayne, who they are kind of co-leaders with, Superman out of the picture in most of this movie, and they don't always see eye to eye, and they go toe to toe, and I think it's a really good dynamic.
It's really good because in this movie, Bruce, whether he's being a bit of a jerk or not, is kind of pressing her on this notion that she's been kind of missing for so long. There's more than a couple of comments he makes and more than a couple of straight up jabs he makes about how she's been essentially hiding for the past 60 plus years. And so she's having this bit of her own arc to go through of not just being a leader, but just kind of revealing herself to the world, essentially. So she does great here. Like I said, she's got a really good dynamic with Affleck, who's, like I said, really kind of fits much more comfortably into the Bruce Wayne role here. And Gal is fantastic in this role. I'm glad she's getting to keep going with it. Although now most people in this movie, one way or another, are going to keep going in some way. But she's really has become synonymous with the character in a way that and this isn't meant as a shot. It's a difficult thing to accomplish, to kind of become synonymous with that character. And she's managed to do that. And it's definitely made the bar for whoever plays live action Wonder Woman next pretty high.
Ezra Miller plays Barry Allen / The Flash. Now, I think this is also a great performance. The one thing I'll say real quick, #Positivity Podcast, but it's a bit strange to me that this is Barry Allen, that they chose to go with Barry Allen, because as much as I like this performance, as fun as it is, and comedic like it's supposed to be, I don't see anything in it that is Barry Allen. I don't know why they didn't just make him Wally West, who's kind of the fun, goofy Flash anyway, but that's fine. Look, we had a different take on Barry Allen, and this is certainly one way to go with it, and I think it is really fun. I like Ezra's energy in this movie.
Yeah, they're clearly meant to be the kind of comedic relief of the team. There's a very kind of serious overtone of this alien invasion and this imminent destruction of the world, so Barry is clearly meant to kind of offset that. You are correct. This is not really how Barry Allen is. In more recent versions, they've kind of retconned Barry to be a little bit more like this, but this is definitely a performance that's more reminiscent of Wally, but probably even more reminiscent of Bart Allen, who's the grandson of Barry Allen, known primarily as Impulse. He's also runs as the Flash and Kid Flash and a variety of other things. But that kind of hypermanic energy is a lot more synonymous with Bart than anyone, but there's definitely shades of Wally here as well. So yeah, and obviously at the end, Barry gets the job at the crime lab, that's a Barry thing through and through. So we're mixing a lot of pieces together for this performance of the Flash. And as you've said, with these movies, you take your shots, you pick and choose, you bring them all together. We talked about it before with Batman Forever, with that Robin kind of having a mix of the different Robins together. And it's no different here. But I do like the performance a lot. I think they bring a lot to the screen that gives the movie a bit of levity to kind of keep us away from the kind of, not necessarily overtly serious tone, but just to kind of add that, just that sense of almost fun to it, that there's somebody here that's a superhero that actually kind of is still kind of enamored with just the thought of having powers and things like that.
I mean, yeah, you're bringing 6 people together. You want that dynamic. You want different personalities, and he definitely brings it. The note I put down is that he is the to steal a line from SNL. Anytime they have Pete Davidson on Weekend Update, he's introduced as SNL's resident young person, and that is his role here. That is Barry's role here. They are the resident young person of the Justice League. Like every other hero, even Cyborg, kind of looks at him like this is the kid of the team, you know?
Right, yeah.
Are you familiar with anything else Ezra was in? We need to talk about Kevin. Seems like his breakout role, which I haven't seen.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, okay, I hear it's kind of a tough watch, but they do a very good job.
That one's a bit uncomfortable, yeah. They do a really good job in it, but it's definitely something where, you gotta power through that one a little bit. It's not everyday viewing.
I did see Trainwreck, which I really enjoyed, and their role literally is to play a young person. If you've seen that, their scene in it, you'll understand why. But yeah, good stuff. I feel like Ezra Miller's star is still on the rise.
They're also in the Fantastic Beasts films. I've only seen the first one of those. I didn't ever see the second one. My boy Mads Mikkelsen is going to be in the third one, so I might have to get caught up. But they play one of the more minor characters in that, and it's definitely a different performance than this. Plays kind of a very meek character who's kind of very repressed and kind of trying to hide what he may or may not be. So Ezra does a really good job in that. He plays it's Credence, I think, is the character's name. But yeah, I think their star is definitely still on the rise. I'm glad they get to keep going with this with The Flash, for also getting to be in the movie that brings my boy Michael Keaton back to Batman. So
I think I'm more excited for that than the Batman.
I definitely am too.
Jason Momoa plays Arthur Curry / Aquaman, which I'm sorry, Jason Momoa playing someone named Arthur is very funny to me.
Yes.
But this is cool casting. This is, I mean, you could say this is a different take. It's not the like Super Friends Aquaman that most of us know, but also in the comics they have also made up. I mean, let's call it what it is. This is an effort to make Aquaman cool. Which they have tried to do in the comics as well. So this isn't totally out of left field, but definitely introducing a cool Aquaman to mainstream audiences. And I think they pull it off. Jason Momoa, he's a cool dude.
Yeah, he's cool. Obviously, like, you know, people kind of tried to do that. Oh, this isn't like, but there's a whole period of time in Aquaman comics where he had long hair and a hook for a hand. And
which is cool.
Was definitely more rough around the edges and more rugged, and that's definitely what they're going for here. And I think it works just fine. I remember when they announced this, a lot of people were just like, oh, well, yeah, if you're going to get somebody cool to play Aquaman, why wouldn't you get Jason Momoa? Like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I think he's really good here. He obviously got a few more chances after this to keep playing Aquaman, and he will. The sequel to Aquaman, I think, is currently being shot.
I still haven't watched Aquaman. That's a mistake on my part, right? I should see this.
There's an octopus that plays drums in that movie, so I mean, you're missing out.
That is like one-upping Ant-Man with the ant playing drums.
Yeah, I mean, I told myself that if Aquaman had an octopus playing the drums, it would be the greatest movie of all time.
Okay. So I'll check it out.
Don't be shocked. Don't be shocked when every top 10 list of movies I ever make has Aquaman at number 1 now. But yeah, Jason Momoa is great here. This is really his first. Like, obviously, all of these guys had cameos and BVS kind of making weird little moments. But here he really gets a chance to kind of walk into the character. I think he does a good job, and he got to obviously keep going with it. So, I think it's great casting.
And of course, before the DCEU, probably known for the TV shows Game of Thrones and WWE Monday Night Raw. Because he looks
I believe you have confused Jason Momoa with professional wrestler Roman Reigns.
Can you blame me? Have you ever seen them in the same room at the same time?
I have not, but I also find it funny that he was on Baywatch Hawaii a long time ago. Jason Momoa has had a quite varied and storied career.
Indeed. Ray Fisher plays Victor Stone / Cyborg. Another performance I really like. I mean, I'll say it up front, casting isn't this movie's problem. I think it's very well cast, very well acted. In particular, I think this is awesome casting for Cyborg. I like that they took different approaches with these characters. Like for Batman, you've got an established star, right? And then for someone like The Flash or Aquaman, they have people like on the rise. And then Cyborg, I feel like, is the unknown casting. I mean, as far as Hollywood's concerned, this was an unknown before his turn here as Cyborg. And I think that was kind of their intention, to have like a star-making performance. And I think he is awesome as Cyborg. I think he nails it. I don't want to derail our episode today too much. We're getting to Zack Snyder's Justice League, but you do see more of this performance there, and I think we're better for it. I think he, unfortunately, gets some stuff on the cutting room floor, especially his dynamic with his father in the movie, that really helped me sell the character. But even with just what we get in theatrical, I think this is a great performance. It seems unlikely we'll see more of Ray Fisher as Cyborg, but I very much think that's a shame, because I enjoyed it.
I think it is a shame. I know he's got, I respect him immensely for sticking to his guns on what happened to him on the set with Whedon and a bunch of others. So I think he's definitely making the right choice in kind of being steadfast. If you do want to see more of Ray Fisher, I recommend True Detective Season 3.
I saw that he was in that. I'm way behind. I watched season 1. It was great. I was told don't watch season 2, but season 3 I think brings it back, and I'm excited to see him in that.
You got Marshall Ali as the lead in that season. He's obviously fantastic. Season 2, this may be my hot take. I think season 2 is only seen as bad because it was trying to follow season 1. Okay. I think it's fine on its own, but like trying to follow the act of True Detective season 1 was like always going to be like a fool's errand type thing, where it's like you were always going to have an uphill battle for that. But I think the space between 2 and 3 allowed 3 to kind of have its own thing. But no, yeah, if you dig Ray Fisher, I would certainly check out True Detective season 3. I think he's in most of the episodes.
Henry Cavill is in this movie, but you know what? You know what's not in this movie? Henry Cavill's mustache.
Yes. Wow. So hashtag positivity podcast. That uncanny valley was rough in this one.
Man, and it's the first shot. Again, the
first scene.
I had never seen
the first scene, guys. Come on.
I had never seen the theatrical cut. I knew the whole saga of his mustache. He had grown it out to be in Mission Impossible Fallout. When they were doing reshoots, he contractually could not shave his mustache, so they edited it out in post. And the first shot of the movie, the first scene of the movie, is a digitally altered shot, and boy, can you tell. But like you said, hashtag positive view podcast. Hey, since we brought that scene up, I really like that scene. It's shot on it's supposed to be like a cell phone,
a kid's phone,
like a kid kind of interviewing Superman, and he's
first podcast.
Yeah, hey, gotta support him. Hey. And we've talked about Henry Cavill a number of times in this podcast already. We've talked about Superman a lot on this podcast. And we have always said that his performance, we remind ourselves over and over again that it's a different take on Superman. And that is okay. You just kind of have to maybe let go of a few pretenses you might have about the character. But I think some of Henry Cavill's best Superman work is in this movie, even though he's not in a lot of it. He's sidelined, he's dead most of the movie, but I like that little interview with the kid because he's a symbol of hope, and he's talking to a kid, and he's smiling, and he's bright, and just chances to show some sides of the character that we had not seen in the previous 2 movies with Henry Cavill.
Yeah, just even the notion that Superman would take the time to answer a kid's questions for his podcast, whatever.
Batman ain't doing that.
Yeah, Batman wouldn't do that. And what a wanker. But no, I genuinely like that, because that is something Superman would do. He'd be the guy that's about to fly away, and this kid would be like, "Hey, I have a question," and Superman would be the guy that stops and ignores all the adults in the room asking him questions and focuses on that kid asking him a question. That's a Superman thing to do, and I did like that scene a lot. It's just the upper lip is a little distracting, but
well, you know what would have been amazing is if they wouldn't have edited out, and they just would have cut it in a way that after he's resurrected, he has a mustache. Just evil Superman has a mustache.
Wish they'd done that.
Just have him grow a goatee.
No, the mustache story is so funny to me, because Warner Brothers asked Paramount if he could shave the mustache and offered to pay for Paramount to digitally put it back. And like even did like a test sequence to show them that it could be done. And Paramount was like, nah, bro. That's what I want. Give me the mustache cut.
God, there's a
give me the mustache cut.
I want to be in
release the mustache cut.
I want to be in that boardroom where they're like people dressed in suits are like, look, you add the mustache. We will pay you millions of dollars to like, no. You take him with a mustache. You shave it off digitally.
Or you don't take him at all.
Just slamming their hands
I
down.
Swear to God, if he shows up to our set without a mustache, there's going to be hell to pay.
Andrew, how long? As someone who is I don't know. I don't grow a ton of facial hair, and you're over there with like this glorious beard. How long does it take to grow a mustache? A Henry Cavill level mustache, mind you. It's not just a little, it's not a pencil thin mustache, but it's a full mustache. How long would that take? Does it not grow in like a week?
No, not how he has it. No, you would probably want at least a month.
Okay.
I mean, still not a tremendously long amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but like, and then again, maybe Henry Cavill's facial hair grows at the speed of the continental drift. I don't know. Yeah. Like it's, I don't know. I
do you think they interviewed him like Henry?
Days.
How long? How many centimeters per day do you get on that thing? And then they have like charts and doing math and trying to.
They were like, so if he shoots Justice League on these 3 days, and then you pick up these reshoots 18 days, 6 hours and 23 minutes later, he will have grown sufficient facial hair to accommodate the change. I can't, it's so, like you said, it's so hilarious to imagine that this was an actual conversation that happened between movie studios. Like people in suits actually discussing this.
Sony and Marvel are arguing about like the rights to Spider-Man and the entire character. And these negotiations come down to a mustache.
You wonder why they lag behind.
All right. Amy Adams plays Lois Lane. Again, for the third time. Obviously, just because of the plot of this movie, how much is going on, it's a reduced role compared to her previous two outings. But a few key scenes, she helps bring Superman sort of back to reality and back to the good side. Remember who he was. And it's Amy Adams. She's one of the best out there. Great casting, great performance.
Yeah, not a whole lot else to say. She basically has a key scene with Martha Kent earlier in the film, and then it's kind of got that key scene with Superman later. And outside that, just a couple of other brief snippets here and there. Yeah, I mean, it's Amy Adams. She's fantastic.
You mentioned Martha Kent, of course, again, played by Diane Lane. Again, one of the best out there. What is there to say? Just a few key scenes. She gets a few. There's an attempt to bring some levity and humor to the character. Obviously, she suffered a lot of tragedy previously, so I think they want to give her, some other shades, some other sides to the character to show.
Yeah, I agree. You get a bit of a subplot with her losing the family farm, and then they resolve that in a pretty funny way at the end of the film too. But it's
Batman using a superpower, yeah.
Yeah, Batman using his superpower. So, but yeah, not a whole lot to it, but she's Diane Lane. What can you say?
J.K. Simmons plays Commissioner Gordon. Now, Andrew, there's very little Commissioner Gordon in this movie. It's 2 scenes, I think. They're pretty short.
Yeah.
Perhaps the biggest casualty from the DCEU breaking down is that we did not get more J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon.
Hey, Chris, you want to hear something, though?
What?
You're going to, though.
What?
He's going to be Commissioner Gordon in the Batgirl movie.
Hey, okay, for one, I didn't know there was a Batgirl movie. And 2, that's cool and so confusing because we're still not getting Ben Affleck, right? So this Gotham with Ben Affleck Batman still exists, and that's where Batgirl is and Commissioner Gordon, but we're not gonna, I don't know. We'll see how they pull it off. You know what? It's worth it if we get more of J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon. And you see those pictures?
And not just is J.K. Simmons going to be in that movie. Brendan Fraser is going to play the villain.
Oh,
so that is also in the running to be the greatest film of all time.
That is my most anticipated movie. What, The Flash? Okay,
The Flash.
It's been usurped by Batgirl. And this dude got jacked to play Commissioner Gordon. I don't know why.
He got friggin' ripped.
But he looks
Jesus.
Like he's got like that grandpa strength. Like he could just crush you. Like those pictures he puts on social media of him working out.
Like I saw one and I was like, that has to be Photoshop. There's no way that's a man's actual body.
And
then it was.
Why? Why are you playing
you're Commissioner Gordon. Like, unless there was going to be I know they've done stories where Commissioner Gordon becomes Batman before. And like, I don't know if you were going to do that or not, but like, Jesus Christ, like by the end, I was like, I'm pretty sure this dude could beat up Ben Affleck at this point.
Becomes Bat Daddy, maybe.
Bat Granddad? No, we're appealing to a different market now, Chris. Got to clean it up.
Great performance. I love his couple scenes.
Yeah.
It's J.K. Simmons. He's great in everything he does. I remember when I heard that casting, I was like, well, I love J.K. Simmons. It's kind of weird. Like, he's J. Jonah Jameson. Like, when I think of comics and, his interaction with superheroes, I'm not going to be able to not see JJ, but he's got a little bit different demeanor, and boom, it works. I love it.
As a hat.
Best of the Rest alum, Kieran Hines plays our villain, Steppenwolf. Now, because of the nature of the villain, it is mocap performance and voice only. It's a CG character, but regardless, this is our bad guy from Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance.
Yep, back as another generic bid bad.
He is, that's just kind of what the story calls for, just a big...
Right.
Evil. I don't think it's too much of a slap in the face to say it's a little bit on the generic side, but we're going to get to it because it's in my favorite scene, but he has some great lines in this movie, just some good bad guy lines that are delivered very well. And I mean, for a mocap voice performance, I think it's about as good as you can ask for in this movie.
I agree. He does a pretty great job with it.
There's a ton of casting we could go through. There's a lot of Amazons. There's a few, what are Aquaman people called? There's a few Atlanteans we could go through, but the only other casting I want to shout out right now is Joe Morton, who plays Silas Stone, Cyborg's father. And I love this casting. You could call it stunt casting because they very much are drawing on our nostalgia and association of seeing this actor as a scientist that builds a robot.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I'd go that far.
He's from Terminator 2. The iconic shot of him holding the arm. They are okay. Well, that's what my brain is putting together when I see him. So I feel like he's got this built-in believability with the character.
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with that. I just don't know if
I'm not saying that's the only reason he was captured.
Zack Snyder was like, who should play Cyborg's father? Oh yeah, Miles Dyson from T2. That's the guy.
Would you put it past Zack Snyder to be that on the nose with his casting?
Zack Snyder is known for his subtlety, so no. But no, I do love this casting. I think it's very, very good. Actually, I think in our version before, I may have given him the Mark Strong of Zack Snyder's Justice.
We'll never know, Andrew.
We'll never know. We'll never know, folks. So don't ask. But yeah, I love Joe Morton. He's obviously T2 is a big thing he's known for, but anytime he's on screen in almost anything, his performances are always great, bringing a certain gravitas, if you will, to the proceedings. His role here is definitely very limited. They tease a little bit at the end, like him and Cyborg kind of having a reconciliation, if you will. Because one of the subplots in this movie is kind of Cyborg being kind of annoyed that his dad kind of brought him back. And kind of annoyed at the situation he's in. Feels like he's now doesn't really fit in, and that's kind of his main plot, and he takes out some of that on his dad. But Joe Morton is great. I'll watch pretty much anything he's in, even Blues Brothers 2000, which was bad for everyone. But well, maybe one day, folks, we'll go that deep into the hole. But yeah, I like what he's doing here. He's great. Not much else to say. I do want to point out there's one other bit part I want to point out. Our boy Mark McClure, who played Jimmy Olsen in all of the Christopher Reeve Superman films, has a cameo here as the officer at Iron Heights when Barry goes to visit his dad.
Oh, that's fun.
I just thought that was a cool little... He's the guy that when Barry draws the glasses on the guy, he's like, are those prescription? That's him. So cool little tease, cool little scene. I just thought it was fun that Zack Snyder saw fit to bring him back. He's done bit appearances and stuff over the years, Superman related. I think he was in think he was in Smallville for a minute, but just always like to see that kind of stuff come back around. And it's just a fun little cameo. But yeah.
Very cool.
Otherwise, this cast list goes on for months. Everyone's in this movie.
Well, I think we can start jumping into the scenes of this movie. And of course, we're going to start with our favorite scenes, what we consider the best scene of the movie. So, Andrew, I'll throw it to you. When do you think this movie is firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Justice League?
I mean, I think it's got to be the final fight. I think it all does kind of coalesce well together there, but
it's a bit of a hot take in my opinion. But I want to hear this. Sell it to me.
Andrew. Something about seeing the team all together doing their thing. Like as a I can't even say as a kid, but like as an adult watching Avengers, there's that money shot of like the Avengers all in a circle when they're in the middle of the battle for New York and everything. And man, the minute I left that theater, the first thing in my head is I'm like, DC is never going to get there. Because at the time, like Dark Knight Rises had just come out. Man of Steel was probably announced, but I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. Like, at least not in the way that I see it. And even then, there's still pieces missing from this. But to have those moments, so like Batman, doing the Batman thing. He's in the Batmobile. He's doing what he can do to his part. Seeing everybody jump in and out, doing their pieces. Having Superman finally show up at the end, doing the classic of all DC crossovers, stall until Superman gets here. I don't know. Something about it works for me. Just seeing the team all together, doing their thing, all having their part. Cyborg taking apart the boxes, Superman ripping them apart, Aquaman and Wonder Woman's fight with Steppenwolf at various points, the Flash doing his piece to run around, save people. All of it just, is it on par with other things? No, but just as a fan of these characters my entire life, basically, seeing a Justice League in a fight with a big old bad villain, it worked for me, and I liked seeing it.
I mean, yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think we're definitely hitting some high points in there. There's a lot of stuff in there I liked. I think my favorite Ben Affleck line is at the beginning of this fight, because I'm pretty sure it's an unintentional pun, but a pun nonetheless. He tells the team,
my favorite kind.
I'm going to knock down that tower. You get to Steppenwolf. Good stuff. I laugh.
I get it.
They do, during like the middle of this fighting, during a Batman scene, they play, Danny Elfman, the composer of this movie, plays a little tease, for the second time in the movie, plays a little tease of his classic Batman score from the Keaton series. And right after that, a little cheeky editing here, Alfred mentions Batman using all of his gadgets and says, you're just playing all your favorite hits. Little fourth wall breaking, a little cheeky, a lot of fun.
A little sassy Alfred there. I dig it.
It is good.
There's a few little bits of John Williams Superman in here too.
I read that. I can't say my ears caught it, but I did read that they threw that in.
It's definitely very subtle. It's definitely in the moment where he shows up with Steppenwolf. Like when he punches him, you get that big kind of flare that's from the Superman theme. To the point that those are actually credited in the credits under the music. The Batman 89 theme and John Williams Superman theme. So
very fun.
So they're in there.
I do love that when Superman shows up, he's not there at the beginning of this fight. He shows up during the fight. The first thing he does is go and save civilians. I mean, there's a big fight with Steppenwolf, and his first concern, he hears them in the distance. He's like, there's civilians here? Like, yeah, the Flash is handling it. The guy's not fast enough. And he immediately goes to help the Flash, which, man, if that isn't Superman. And we get a little bit of fun racing between Superman and the Flash for the first time in this movie. They bring it back later.
Yes.
And more classic Superman. I love it. He catches up the Flash, which kind of freaks him out a little bit because they're going at just about the same speed. And he calls him a slowpoke, which is just fun. It's not grandpa humor. It's just like old-timey classic Superman, calling the Flash a slowpoke. Right. And they work together to save the civilians. And again, you don't see that kind of stuff in Man of Steel, and you don't see it in BVS. So I'm glad that we got a few, what I would consider classic Superman moments in this movie.
I agree. And I believe that was a deliberate choice. I think the whole civilian aspect of this was something that was added for the theatrical, because I believe in the Snyder version, this area is just abandoned. I don't think there's any civilians or anything. But I liked seeing it. Like, and they have the little one-upsmanship. Barry's like running people out individually. Superman just picked up the whole building, flew everyone out. So you get some stuff like that, but I like that. Like, he shows up, he punches out Steppenwolf to kind of stop him from getting to Cyborg, and then immediately he's like, there's people that need saving. So he runs and he does it, and we get some cool little moments with Flash and Superman where they're saving people, and it's classic Superman, and it's giving Cavill those moments to just kind of be Superman that he really hadn't gotten a lot to this point. So I was glad they found a way to work that in.
And he gets to be badass still. He gets to fight. I liked when they finally take down Steppenwolf. He uses his ice breath to freeze his big hammer, his big axe, whatever his weapon is.
Big axe, yeah.
And then one comes in and slashes it and breaks it apart. Definitely a lot of the fighting in this movie, I think I said it back on Man of Steel, but it reminds me so much of the Injustice games, the way they use their combos and powers together. And that's not a bad thing. And I'm kind of comparing it to a video game, but I think they are... translating the comic book action, bringing it to life. You want to see the cool stuff. You want to see all the little tricks and powers they can do, and I think they managed to have every little power shine at the right moment. Good action, good choreography. Good scene, Andrew. I think it's a good pick. I was a little surprised you picked it, but it's not because it's a bad scene, and you're right. It is great seeing all of the Justice League together. For my favorite scene, it is also an action scene, but it does not contain the entire Justice League. It does have most of them, though. My favorite scene in this movie is the first encounter against Steppenwolf in the sewers.
Yes.
You've got 5 of the 6, so not quite all there. Superman is still dead at this point, but each member gets to have their chance to shine and show off their powers, and there's just so many good beats. I think this is just such a well-scripted and executed part of this movie. I mentioned Steppenwolf has a few really good bad guy lines, and I kept taking notes throughout as this scene escalated, because at first he's got some hostages down there when the Justice League show up, and one of the civilians is pleading with him, please, we have families, and he says, why does everyone keep telling me that? And that is just such a menacing bad guy line. He's like, why do you think I care that you have a family? That is so beneath me. That is so irrelevant to my plans. And it is so good. And then just a little bit later, because he's already fought the Amazons, and then he has an encounter with the Wonder Woman, and he says, child, my axe is still slick with the blood of your sisters. And I was like, ooh, that's the best line. That's a good bad guy line. That's even better. And then to top it all off towards the end of the scene, before he zaps out of there and leaves them, he thinks to drown, all the water's rushing in. He calls them all primitive beings, which again is just just everyone is an ant to him, even the superheroes. And again, you can call it a generic bad guy. It kind of is. We don't get a lot of backstory about him. He's just big and powerful and a threat that has to be stopped. But in those moments, in those lines, man, it was very well delivered, and just good bad guy stuff, man. Yeah,
completely agree.
It's sort of the Flash's first big hero moment, because he's been kind of using his powers almost kind of trying to remain hidden and not quite present himself to the world as a superhero yet. So he's definitely inexperienced, and he feels really in over his head whenever they arrive. And Batman gives him a good little pep talk. And I like, because, the Batman of these movies is like a 20-year veteran. He's been around. He's had some Robins under his wing. And he gives him such a good little pep talk that basically ends with, save one. Just save one civilian. Just make that your goal. You save one person, you've done your job. Just, it's sort of like that, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Just focus on this one task at hand and execute it. And he does. And the Flash zaps somebody out of the building, and then he's like, okay, one down. And then he goes back in and sort of gains his confidence. And it's just great character development for the character, good interactions between Batman and the Flash. There's a lot of little dynamics within this group of 6, a lot of one-on-one relationships that are done really well. It's one of the things that people don't talk about when they talk about the Justice League. Like I said, most conversations are not very positive about this movie. All in all, I had a good time watching it, and a lot of stuff really surprised me. And those little dynamics, probably at the top of the list. I particularly like Wonder Woman and Cyborg. She's got kind of like a motherly relationship with him. Guiding force, Batman and Flash here was great. There's a lot of good little moments in this movie.
Yeah, the recruitment process is focused on, like, obviously Batman brings Flash in and Wonder Woman basically brings Cyborg in. So there's this bit of like a father, almost a Batman Robin-esque relationship between Batman and the Flash here. Because obviously Batman, like you said, he's this aged veteran. Robin is this kind of fresh, new superhero who's not even really been a superhero yet. Like, he has this whole thing where he's like, all I've really done to this point is push people out of the way. He's like, I've never like fought this. He's like, I don't know what this is. And so you get that kind of father-son type mentorship between Barry and Bruce that I think is very effective. Obviously, Bruce and Diana's dynamic is a lot more mature. Obviously, that's more of a difference in ideologies. So not just do we have all these interactions, there are different types of interactions. Like with Wonder Woman and Cyborg, it's a lot more of like, you don't have to live in the shadows, even though she's kind of been doing that. So it's kind of that flip on the head of like, you're telling me that I need to come out and not be afraid of what I am, but yet you've been hiding for the last 80 years or whatever. And so it's not just, they're challenging each other at the same time. And like you said, it all works pretty well.
Yeah.
The only person we don't really get any dynamics with is Superman, just because
he's not there.
He doesn't come back until 2/3 of the way through this movie. It's actually, yeah, like you said, it's actually done really well, surprisingly. And it's not really talked about.
The big money shot, I remember from the trailers, is also in this action scene. And that's when you've got this whole almost diorama going in slow motion of Steppenwolf falling after Wonder Woman reaching up for her, and she's trying to reach her sword, and it's just out of reach. And the Flash sees what's going on, and he uses, of course, his super speed to run across the walls and down the well and just barely tap Wonder Woman's sword just enough so it comes within her reach, so she can then slash at Steppenwolf. And it's the, like I said, the money shot, all the visual effects. I love the Flash's effects for him running fast. They've got just an immense amount of lightning every time he goes into it, and they don't bother explaining the details of the Flash, the speed force that he taps into to gain his powers, but they visualize it very well. And I don't know if, in the Flash movie, they might get into more of the semantics and explanation. I don't know if they're ever going to get into all the minutia of it. But all that lightning that strikes as he moves because he's tapping into the speed force is just such a cool visual. And these slow motion scenes, or whenever it shows the scene in normal motion and the Flash is like a blur, either way, it never feels like Quicksilver from the X-Men. It never feels like stuff we've seen already. I think they do a great job making his power set and showing it to us feel very unique and just pretty awesome.
No, I agree. The Speed Force is this kind of, it's a kind of nebulous thing that definition and everything is. I mean, the Speed Force is a Wally West invention, generally speaking. So it doesn't even exist for Barry's entire run as the Flash, and it doesn't come about until later. Like I said, they mention it offhand here, like when Barry and Bruce are walking to his car, like Barry just offhandedly mentions basically it's this force that he taps into. But yeah, they make it look different. They don't make it feel like what we've seen before. They make it feel unique. And it's a very cool look. And we get some really fun scenes with him in slow motion that are still like, I still really like the scene where like he's running and like Superman turns to look at him and he's like horrified.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh God. And then like that whole fight is cool because like Superman's moving almost as fast as he is.
Yeah.
And it's done so well because the Flash is moving essentially at like normal speed, and Superman's just slightly slower than him. And I am a vehement believer that the Flash must be faster than Superman. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yes, I agree.
So
preach.
The Flash has got to be faster than Superman. You heard it here, folks.
Just like Storm can't make ice bridges because Iceman has to have something.
Iceman's job. But no, I love that scene in particular just for that showing of like he's almost there, but not quite.
Yeah, like he can.
Flash always has to be slightly
He can
faster.
dodge Superman's moves, but like he shouldn't have to dodge someone's moves. Like he shouldn't be in a situation where he has
he's the
to,
Flash.
Like,
He shouldn't be in this situation, but he's Superman. So what are you going to do? So
what are you gonna do?
That's genuine. Like that scene is like 8 seconds. It's not very long. It's not enough for a favorite scene, but I do love that little snippet. I'm not a fan of evil Superman, as we've established, but that sequence in that fight I just thought was a really cool way to illustrate, again, how their powers are different. Because when you get people on a team that have the same kind of powers, movies don't always do the best at like differentiating them, like what makes him different. And that's a really good scene that's like Superman's fast, but he ain't that fast. So I like that a lot.
We get to see Batman's vehicle, the Nightcrawler, which there's never been in a movie before. I don't know if it's a comic thing or this is a brand new vehicle to us, but it is pretty rad. It's kind of like a giant spider all the Wild Wild West that crawls like down on the walls, down in the sewers. It's a pretty cool vehicle. It's something different, which is hard to do with Batman these days in vehicles. We've seen his plane, his boat, his Batmobile. Hey, now we got a Nightcrawler. And there's two things I really like about this. One, again, talking about just awesome 8-second scenes. When the Nightcrawler comes down into the sewers and Batman jumps into it, that shot is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not even exaggerating that much. The camera is inside the Nightcrawler and it's sideways down in the sewer. And Batman jumps into it and then he has to twist to align with the seat. And the camera twists with him. They spin like in unison. And it's so smooth. It's just done so well. And the other fun thing with the Nightcrawler is eventually Cyborg jumps in and he, connects with the interface and he takes over. And Alfred, who's been talking to Batman this whole time, now hears Cyborg and he tells him, he says, "Thanks, Alfred. I'll take it from here." And sassy Alfred, he says, "Do I know you?" Like, what do you mean? Don't take it from here.
Excuse me. Do I know you?
Yeah, it's very good.
No, I love that. This is like we've established before. This is the Alfred that's like he's definitely back, but he's like in on the action. Like he's controlling the Nightcrawler until Bruce gets there, and like he's in it. And I like that about Alfred too, where he's not in the field, but he's definitely doing his part. And I like that about this Alfred too. So. But no, that whole sequence is really great. I can't deny that at all. It's a really good action sequence. It's a really good introduction to seeing kind of, and it's meant to kind of illustrate that as close as the Justice League gets, they're still missing that something that puts them over the edge in fighting Steppenwolf, and that's big on the decision to bring back Superman. And so it's a very integral scene as well.
For Wonder Woman's introduction scene, I love like 95% of it. It's a really good scene. I like the shot of her deflecting the bullets. The terrorists are opening fire on these hostages that they have, and she moves, of course, as fast as bullets, using her gauntlets to deflect them all. And again, you've got the Flash, which doesn't look like Super Speed we've seen before. And we've got Wonder Woman here in this scene going not as fast as the Flash, but moving faster than humans can. And it's still like a different effect. It's like everyone's moving at normal speed and she's just a little bit faster. It looks pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that bothers me is, it's one thing for Danny Elfman to tease his Batman theme. It's one thing for them to tease the Superman theme. Why do we just tease the Wonder Woman theme? Give it to us. It is the best thing in the DCEU as far as the score goes. Like, play it. That thing fires me up every time.
Just give it to me. They
just kind of tease it, but they don't break out with that guitar riff. And I'm it's like 10 minutes in the movie, and it takes a while for that anger to subside because I was like, okay, they're saving it for later. She's gonna have a big scene. Nope, they never do it. Damn you, Danny.
They never do. How dare you, Danny? Use Han's music. It's over. It's right there for you. But yeah, this is a cool introduction. It's definitely played like, we're just getting Wonder Woman doing her thing. I think that's a cool way to set her up. It's a pretty straightforward threat. Wonder Woman comes in, saves all the people, stops the villains.
Yeah. Big hero shot of her standing on the Lady Justice statue. Good stuff.
I do like the sequence of Steppenwolf versus the Amazons. I think this is a good introduction because this is really our first shot of Steppenwolf. Because at this point, we've just seen that the Amazon's mother box is reacting, cracking.
It's on.
Having a bad day. Is this thing on? So it's there, it's doing its thing, but then this culminates in Steppenwolf appearing with the parademons and trying to take it. But this gives us Connie Nielsen back as the Queen of the Amazons, and they're basically trying to keep this thing away from Steppenwolf. So we get this really drawn-out fight where they're fighting inside this kind of, I don't know if you'd call it like a prison or like a storage dome for this temple, sure. Where ultimately they try to trap Steppenwolf and his parademons inside of it, and this really cool thing where like she's sliding down this hallway while her Amazons are like knocking out these posts and these walls are dropping kind of subsequently as she like slings out. And the last one they like hold up for her to get. Just, strong, tough, thick women holding up walls. It works for me for some reason.
Dude, when they're smashing those pillars, like with those mallets, like in slow motion, I'm like, this is... I'm not going to get horny on me. But
it's working for me. I don't know why, but it is.
It's doing something. It's good. We're learning today.
We're learning today. So this has been an educational experience, folks. So she gets out with the mother box and is trying to run away. And again, we get more Amazons fighting Steppenwolf and his parademons. Kind of culminates in still Steppenwolf getting the box and transporting away. But then the queen basically fires off this thing to alert Wonder Woman to what's happening. But it's just a cool, drawn-out action sequence that shows that Steppenwolf, has no problem dispatching an army of Amazons, basically. So it's a fairly effective way of setting up how bad this dude actually can be and how little these people mean to him as a threat, which makes the idea of building the Justice League all the more important. So, but yeah, it's a fun little action sequence.
It's been a while since we've had to highlight a yellow spandex moment. A moment where the movie sort of takes its time to poke fun at something from the comic books that inspired it. But we definitely...
Right.
We get it here with Batman and Aquaman going back and forth because there's a running joke on both sides where Aquaman is like, so let me get this straight. You do it dressed as a bat, like an actual bat. And, I'm watching, I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. What don't you get about this? And then Batman comes back where he's like, he's making jokes like you talk to fish, but you do talk to fish, right? Can you talk to fish? Because that's kind of everyone's joke about.
But seriously, do you talk to fish?
Yeah, and it's like
there's a lot of moments in the movie where he makes a joke about it, and then he keeps coming back, and he's like, "Can you can you is that a thing you actually do?"
I still don't know, by the way. I haven't seen Aquaman yet, but it was never answered.
You can't talk to fish; they're not smart enough for it.
No, okay.
It's the running. There's a sequence of some book where
am I out of touch? No, it's the fish who are wrong.
No, it's the fish. There's some, I think it might have been Jeff Johns running Aquaman, but Aquaman goes somewhere and he has a fish and chips and a bunch of people are like, how could you do this, Aquaman? That's a fish and chips. And they're like, don't you talk to fish? And I think he says something like, I can't talk to fish. Fish aren't that smart. And I'm like, well, that's hurtful. Maybe there is a fish who's that smart, but that's definitely a Jeff Johns thing to write though. That's the one moment where, and not only that, but Batman's not dressed as a bat. He's using the symbology, but I would never say Batman is dressed as a bat. I
don't know. He's got ears. I guess he could just easily be a cat. Well, he's got wings though. I don't know. What would you call it? If you don't know he's named Batman, and you see a man walked up dressed as Batman, what would you think?
I would think he's called Batman, sure, but I would not say he's dressed as a bat. He doesn't have the weird, do you ever see The Return of Bruce Wayne where he's got the giant bat pelt that he wears?
Yeah.
That's dressed as a bat to me. But this, I'm just he's just using bat symbology. It's different.
Okay.
I swear to God, it's different.
Another great Sassy Alfred line, which does a bit of world building. He says, I miss the days when one's biggest concerns were exploding wind-up penguins. Obvious reference to...
Riddler.
The Riddler. And I don't know if it's
sorry.
It's really drawing so specifically on Batman Returns, which has I don't know. Do you think that's
wind up penguins?
Do you think that's trying to draw on Batman Returns specifically, or just the greater lore that he faced the Penguin and apparently the Penguin had exploding toys?
I think that's more just general, they could have thrown in anything there. One misses when one's biggest problems were mindless riddles or some crap. You could have thrown in anything. I think we're just that's just meant for us to be oh, this Batman fought the Penguin at some point. That's all I think it's for. And, maybe if that's credit, that's expecting us to just draw a line to Batman Returns. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think that was specific to Batman Returns. I think that was just, hey, remember when Batman fought other things?
One's biggest concerns were holidays on a calendar.
One's biggest concerns were extended Halloweens.
Barry Allen, that's That's a deep one, Andrew. Barry Allen does visit his dad a couple times. We get some backstory there. For this movie being under 2, it's exactly 2 hours with credits.
It's literally, I thought that was interesting because like literally the supposed edict from Warner Brothers was 2 hours, and the movie is exactly 2 hours.
Yeah, they made every use of it.
Like to the second.
Considering how many characters are in this movie and how many of them have not been established before or only been hinted at, like the Flash and Aquaman and Cyborg, they do a pretty good job, like, filling us in and giving us backstories.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been totally fine with being like a Justice League movie and like the movie being like, you know who they are. Let's just let them do their thing. I would have been fine with that. But they do put in some effort to put in some backstories to kind of tee up solo movies we can expect to come in the future. And with the Flash, he visits his dad in prison, played by Billy Crudup, which, for as small as the role is in this movie, he's a bit overqualified for it. I gotta imagine it's, setting up, again, future movies or spin-offs where we dive more.
Well, and this guy's a Zack Snyder alum, man.
That's true. Yeah, he's naked blue man.
He is. How are you gonna forget Naked Blue Man?
I forgot about Naked Blue Man. I'm sorry. Blue Man.
How dare you?
Blue Man, naked. I like Billy Crudup. He's got just such a good presence, unique voice, priceless, some would say. But those scenes are good. It gives Flash a bit of an arc. His dad wants him to forget about him, move on, get a job, quit trying to solve my case. And Cheeky Barry, kind of does 2 birds with 1 stone, and he gets a job in a crime lab. So he did what his dad wanted, got a job, but he's still gonna look into his dad's case and try to get him out of prison.
So this is setting up that new dynamic of the Flash, Barry Allen's kind of status quo after he returns, which is that Professor Zoom is responsible for having his mother dying and his father getting framed for it. So Barry has dedicated his life to trying to prove his father's innocence, and that's essentially the through line of Barry Allen after he returned, and that is obviously coming to slight fruition here. That culminated in Flashpoint in the comics, but that's a longer conversation for another day. But this is just enough of a teaser for it. Obviously, they mentioned the storyline here of just, I think it's Alfred mentions it to Bruce at one point that his father killed his mother, and Bruce is just like, ugh, it's rough. So we're setting that up. Like I said, 2 scenes, I think, with Henry Allen in this movie. Not a lot, but it's enough to set up that story. Unfortunately, Crudup will not be returning to this role in the Flash film. Because I guess he was busy or something. So Ron Livingston's going to do it instead. And if you hadn't told me, I may not have even noticed. But I was looking at them next to each other, and I was like, yep, that would have completely flown right by me. But yeah, so that'll, like you said, I think the intention was always for that to get picked up later, especially with Iris West, who was in the original cut of this film and isn't in the longer cut, but she's not in this version. That was all, I think, just going to be set up for the Flash movie. So we'll see where they choose to go with it.
I do like the Flash characterization. It's all done very efficiently. We have this backstory with his dad, and then whenever Bruce Wayne shows up at the Flash's hideout, because he's figured out who he is, first of all, I like how he makes him prove that he's a Flash. He throws a batarang at him, and that shot of the Flash in super speed, like looking over at the batarang, looking back at Bruce Wayne, it reminds me of the original Spider-Man where Flash Thompson goes to punch Peter Parker and he just moves to the side and he's like, huh, and he sees that fist go by in slow motion. Very similar, but it's cool how he plucks the batarang out of the air. But he talks about himself a little bit. Like I said, he's got that quick line kind of explaining the Speed Force. And I like how he talks about how his power affects him, like, socially. And he makes a point to be like, he's like out of step with everyone else. He's not at the same pace with everyone. He doesn't really get people. And the example he gives is a little bit weird. He's like brunch. What's the deal with brunch? Like he almost
turns into a Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's
like, what's the deal with brunch?
90s. I was waiting for like that bass line to like come in.
That's the version you have to cut for the YouTube channel.
Yeah, totally will do that.
Like brunch. What's the deal with brunch?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that joke landed with people or not, but I like the characterization. I like because he moves at these heightened speeds and can process things so fast and metabolism so crazy, like he just has a problem connecting with people. And it's not a big plot thread or anything. It's just letting us, learn a little bit more about our young hero. Good stuff. Good writing.
I agree. I think that scene is very effective because there's not just like you've got that hyperactive sense to it, but there's also a kind of sadness about it. Not overt, but just like you can tell that like this is not somebody who's got a lot of people that, are out there. So he sees this not just as a chance to do some good, but as a chance to hopefully, maybe he'll find out the true friends were the people we met along the way. So but no, it's a great scene. I do like that scene a lot.
Speaking of efficient storytelling with character building, I like the moment with Cyborg where he interacts with his dad for the first time. And you get this little hint that, things aren't okay. Victor was in an accident, and to save his life, his dad used a mother box to create Cyborg, give him a cybernetic body empowered by the mother box.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor is now something else entirely. He's part Victor, part mother box power, and he resents his dad for it. And he can't let anybody know what he's done, so Victor's been seemingly holed up like in this dark apartment. And I love the line where he's like, soon, the world's just not ready. And he goes like, what, to see the monster? And his dad assures him, you're not a monster. And then Cyborg looks at him and goes, it's weird you thought I meant me. And I'm just like, oh, like, oh my gosh. Got him. That was good.
That's just like the burned gift of everybody freaking out. That one's fun. Yeah, I think that's a really good scene too. We're obviously getting the dynamic that there is a bit of a tense dynamic between Victor and Silas. Silas was obviously trying to get some semblance of his family back after what happened in the accident, and Victor is kind of having to deal with the ramifications of that. And I think this was a good scene to set up that dynamic.
There's some good needle drops in this movie. I really like Icky Thump by White Stripes hitting, and it's you've got Aquaman walking on the pier, like slamming a bottle of whiskey and throwing it down, which it's weird that Aquaman litters, but I'll let it slide. And then he dives into the ocean.
Glass is biodegradable.
Of course. Eventually everything's biodegradable, right?
Yeah, some stuff.
Give it enough time.
I mean, eventually the Earth's going to be destroyed, so yeah.
There you go. I'm about to bring this episode's momentum to a screeching halt with this very specific reference, but I gotta get it out there. When Aquaman goes and faces Steppenwolf down in his kingdom where the mother box is being held, that set, like where the fight takes place, it reminds me so much of a level from Super Mario 64. I had to look up the name of it. It's the Secret Aquarium. So it's a secret level, it's a hidden level, but it's underwater. You got to collect 7 red coins. The only thing to do in the level. It's just you're inside like a tower, like underwater, and there's a big fan in the middle. And it's exactly where Aquaman fights and where the mother box is being held. A shortcoming of an audio podcast is that I can't give you a visual of this, but there's someone listening that knows that level well and knows this scene good enough that they're putting together and make, yeah, Chris, you're right. And thank you for getting me. Everyone else, I apologize, but I had to say it.
I mean, you didn't have to say it.
I had
to. But, I respect it. But, yeah, no, there are some cool needle drops in this movie, like you were saying. And I do like I thought it was a little over the top in the trailers where they were using the Beatles Come Together as the main track, but
I don't understand, Andrew.
I don't either. That's why it was so odd. It seemed like an odd choice, but that version is like musically it's done by Junkie XL, but Gary Clark Jr. sings it. Gary Clark Jr. is great. If you haven't listened to Gary Clark Jr., you should. He's awesome, but I'll always be a fan of him being in cool, high-profile things. So yeah.
Yeah, that version plays in the credits, like in between the bonus scenes that we get. And I watched all the credits, I want to see all the scenes and stuff. And yeah, when that song came on, I was like, this can go. Like
slaps.
I like the original by the Beatles. I like the Aerosmith cover for Armageddon. And I really like this one. Turns out Come Together is a great song. Who knew?
Yeah, it turns out. Who would have thought?
I immediately added this version to my my playlist of cover songs. It is very good. I like the feel to it. In fact, we got over in our Discord, we got a message about that specifically. Phil from Missouri says, it is a bit too on the nose, which again, I don't understand what he means by that. But I actually really love the cover of Come Together they used for the movie. It's got a great, heavy, and industrial vibe to it, which I think really fits with the tone. And I agree, it's a great song, and it just fits the movie well, like tonally. It's fun, heavy, driving. It works. It's a great cover.
Definitely works. I like it a lot. I'm going to have to go add it to my jams playlist.
Is that all caps? Jams.
Yeah. With 4 A's.
Okay. Going back to the fight real quick where Superman first comes back and he's fighting the Justice League, and there's that cool shot with him looking over at the Flash as he runs. He's got a few cool like one-on-one moments with each character, but I really like where he goes toe-to-toe with Wonder Woman, who is also very strong and physically can give him a pretty good matchup. And at one point they're locked up and she gives him a big headbutt, which kind of staggers him. And then he levitates a few feet off the ground and gives her a headbutt back that just like drives her into the ground. That the impact of that moment was pretty cool. Really well done.
I think he headbutts her first, then she headbutts him back, then he lifts her up and drops her, which makes it even cooler to me.
Yeah,
because it's like Wonder Woman full on headbutting her, and then it's Wonder Woman being like, this is how we're doing this, and just headbutts him straight back, and I'm like, that's dope. Yeah, get some fun bat quips during this fight too, where Batman and Superman finally have their kind of return face off. Where there's a line Superman says here that I don't like that Superman says it, but in context it works pretty well. Where like he has like Batman by the throat, and he's like lifting it up in the air, and Superman is kind of like, "You won't let me live, and you won't let," or he's like, "You won't let me die, and you won't let me live," like. And I'm just like, I don't like that Superman is saying that to somebody, but in the context of this, it works really well. And then he does the flip of it, and he's like, do you bleed? And then if Lois shows up and he snaps out of it, they just like whips Batman behind him, just like tosses him to the side. And you just hear him crash in the background, then he goes off with Lois, and then Batman is like rolling around, just like, oh yeah, something's definitely bleeding. And I was like, Batman, this is not the time for quips.
Who are you saying this to?
Yeah, exactly. Like, who? Are you saying this to Alfred? He's in the car with Lois. He can't help you now.
Andrew, before we wrap this up, I have a very important question I got to ask you.
Sure.
What is the name of Aquaman's weapon?
It's a trident.
Why does it have 5 prongs?
It's a quindent?
Pendant?
Pendant?
Pendant? It's a pendant. Is there another name for this, or does he call it a trident?
I assume they were always called tridents, and now I realize that trident means 3 prongs, and I feel like a damn fool, Chris.
You walked right into my trap, Andrew. No, that's fine. I don't know. I'll Google this later. But Andrew, in your summation, briefly, if you can, how does this movie function as an adaptation of the Justice League? And we could go one by one through these characters and talk about how they're different iterations of them, but as far as a story that involves a threat so large that the heroes have to come together, do you think this gets that feeling across?
Yeah, sure.
All right, and we'll see you next week.
And we're done, folks. Now, as an adaptation, obviously the Justice League's first villain was Starro the Conqueror. So, as a direct adaptation of the first Justice League adventure, 0 giant starfishes. So, therefore, 0 out of 10. No. Obviously, this was playing off the Rebirth reclassification of Justice League, which had Darkseid be their first villain. And the New 52 is a very confusing thing because it was that weird, we're rebooting our continuity, but not really. But it was trying to streamline a lot of things. And this is one of the things that I think was seen as a lot better of a function for the Justice League's origin was Darkseid. And so this movie was obviously meant to build to Darkseid. And for those of you who have seen the Snyder version, Darkseid does appear in that one much more directly. But as a story of building up, I mean, this is, on par with like what Avengers storytelling was doing. Like Loki was the first Avengers villain, but putting together a threat that just requires everybody to come together, I think it works just fine. It's having to juggle a lot of different things at once. We've only seen a few of these characters to this point kind of be fleshed out and developed, so it had to play a lot of catch up. I think it does juggle those things pretty well. Like you said, some of these characters were definitely mixing and matching things as far as different versions. The Flash probably most notable of those, while somebody like Cyborg, I think, is a pretty good adaptation of that character. Overall, I think it's definitely, it's giving it the old college try. Does it all work? I can't, maybe not, but what movie does it all work in? So, yeah, I think overall this was a valiant attempt at trying to bring the Justice League to the screen in the best way you could.
Well said. And Joe Manganiello plays Deathstroke.
I say this as a joke, but like everybody still clamors for him to play Deathstroke. And I'm like, man, I wish I could play a character for a grand total of like 72 seconds and instill such a following.
That suit, though, pretty rad, because I didn't really see it for a few seconds.
I can't deny that.
I didn't know
a dope suit
about that scene. Did that leak ahead of time? Did we know we'd be seeing Deathstroke, or did they keep that under wraps?
I think they kept it under wraps.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that was supposed to head towards the Batman movie that was coming out with Ben Affleck. 'Cause apparently Deathstroke was supposed to be a big bad in that. Do get a bit more of a classic looking Lex Luthor in that final scene as well.
Well, we saw him bald at the end of BVS.
Well, we get the full suit, the kind of a little bit more straightforward Lex as opposed to the kind of manic energy of BVS.
All right, let's get out of here. Boy, Andrew, what a year for Best of the Rest. What a place. I think it's a pretty appropriate place to end Justice League, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Big deal. Agree. Capping it off. We, I'm not sure. We might get back to the DCEU, but, this run of Zack Snyder movies, this very specific timeline seems to be done by now. So even if we do get back to the DCEU with something, it probably won't be so closely tied to these, so it kind of feels like an appropriate end of an era there.
Yeah.
As this is the first time I've watched the theatrical cut, man, I think this movie is so much better than its reputation. And I've got the luxury of watching it 4 years later. There's no hype, there's no build around it, there's no pressure, but I, kind of expected something a lot rougher than what I got. I had a good time with this movie.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think the story of its existence definitely hurts its reputation. People obviously were not, at the time it came out, we didn't quite know the full scope of what had happened. And I think knowing all of that definitely, not to say that this movie's perfect or anything, but like I think that definitely turned people off to it, not just in relation to what happened to Snyder in relation to the movie, but what's happened and what's come out about Joss Whedon in the years since. I think that's definitely just kind of moved this movie over to the delete bin of life next to Mahogany Rush. So,
sick reference, Andrew. Before this year ends, you should go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for our show. And I want you to go one step farther. Leave a review for every podcast that you listen to regularly. You get those shows for free. This is something that you can give back also for free. It helps us tremendously get discovered by new people, helps with algorithms, and you know what? We like reading nice stuff about us, just like this review that we received from Captain Stubbs 1. They write, the most positive vibes in podcast. BOTR is a great podcast, even for someone who barely watches movies. Two great personalities who know what they're talking about and have fun doing it. I hate doing the show. The show always...
Can't stand you.
The show always puts me in a better mood, having listened to the sheer amount of positivity the hosts exude. That's a good word. Maybe it'll even get me to watch more movies. Maybe. Love what you're doing.
That's the hope.
And keep it up. Captain Stubbs 1, we will keep it up into 2022 and beyond. We'll be old men exuding our positivity along with our old man Musk, and I dare you to try to stop us. If you are listening to this episode the first week it comes out, hope you're having a wonderful holiday season. Have a great new year. If you're listening to this in the future and the backlog, and none of this stuff makes any sense because it's not the end of the year anymore. But thanks for listening anyway, listener from the future. And a message to all of you. Please remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow, and we certainly appreciate it. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Hey. Timing it out.
And this is giving us Connie Nielsen back as, what is her character's name? Connie Nielsen back as Queen Hippolyta and Hippolyta.
I had no idea.
It's Connie Nielsen. But this gives us Connie Nielsen back as the Queen of the Amazons.